All right, so what did we leave off? We left off on P?
Invasion of the Soviet Union.
Right, we did that, but what number is it? P or Q?
G.
G? All right. That was G or this is G?
That was G.
That was G, so this one is what, Q?
H.
There we go, H, done. All right, H it is. H for harbor, huh? Huh? All right, so the bombing of Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941, a day that will live in infamy, as Franklin Roosevelt's going to say. So the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor is the name of the harbor in Honolulu, Hawaii. Okay, it's the name of the harbor in Honolulu, Hawaii, and the Japanese bomb it. Basically, the Japanese were running out of resources, and so the Japanese needed to gain more resources. So what they needed to do was take over like the Philippines and Indonesia. They needed to take over those parts of Asia. Where's my Asia map? Holy moly. I guess I don't have one. All right. So they needed to take over those parts of Asia. Oh, here we go. They needed to take over this area called the Dutch East Indies and the Philippines because this area has all the rubber, right? It has like almost all the world's rubber. And so Japan didn't have any rubber. They didn't have any oil. They were missing a lot of resources, right? And so they knew that they had to take this stuff over or they wouldn't be able to hold China. But the problem is that taking over these areas means you're going to go to war with the United States and you're going to go to war with England, right? England and the United States, two countries that Japan so far has been trying to avoid. But it's come up to a point by the time we get to 1941, Japan just needs the stuff so bad. And so their plan changes and they decide that what they're going to do is they're going to knock the United States out right away. And that way they're going to be free to do whatever they want in Asia. Okay, so they have two goals. Their first goal is, and you could put goals, Japanese goals for the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Their first goal is that they're going to destroy the entire American fleet. They think they're going to be able to sink all of our ships in Hawaii. They think they'll be able to sink our entire navy, and it'll take us so long to build a new navy that they think they're going to have a year or more of time before we can build our ships again. Okay, their second goal is they think that the United States is weak and scared of fighting, and they think that because the United States isn't involved in wars, that the United States is a bunch of like little sissy boys that won't go fight. Right? And so what they think is that if they shock the United States so dramatically that the United States will just run away and be scared and just won't even fight back. Right? The Japanese talk about it in those terms. I'm exaggerating slightly, for comic effect, but the Japanese do talk about it in those kinds of terms. They think that the United States is a weak country. They think that because the United States doesn't go out and conquer colonies and doesn't go out and conquer things, that the United States is just some kind of like defanged version of Europe, right? Some kind of weak version of Europe, right? Well, as you may know already, they're wrong on both accounts. They're wrong on both of these goals, okay? First goal, what? Sam, what was the first goal?
Get rid of the entire American Pacific Fleet.
Okay, here's the problem. We only keep 25% of our fleet in Hawaii, right? As it turns out, we keep 50% of our fleet on the East Coast of the United States. We keep 25% of our fleet in California, and then 25% of our fleet in Hawaii. So at best, they were only going to destroy 25% of our boats, at best, right? Here's the other problem. Most of our ships weren't at harbor. They were out in the ocean, right? We don't just store them all in the harbor, right? They're out in the ocean practicing and, doing drills and, doing stuff. So we only had like 3 ships in the harbor. So it went from destroy all the ships to destroy only 25% of the ships to destroy only 3 of the ships, right? The other part of this is the problem is that if they believe that they can, destroy the entire fleet, and it was going to take a year to build a new fleet back up again, they didn't understand how big the American industry was. Right? By the end of the war, the American industry is building a new ship every couple of minutes. Right? Yeah. So they just had no concept of how large of an industry the United States was. So that's the problem. Okay. Problem number 2, right? How likely is it that the United States is going to be so shocked that we just don't go to war? Does that sound even remotely American to you?
No.
No.
No, right? What did we do in the Spanish-American War when one of our ships got blown up?
We blow up lots of their ships.
We flipped out, man. We invaded like 7 places, right? Right? We invaded like 7 places, and we only lost 1 ship, and it's 1 ship that we blew up ourselves, right? Like, right? Right? If you think about 9/11, right? 9/11 is a legitimate attack. We were attacked on 9/11, and they knocked down, 3 buildings. They killed 3,000, a little more than 3,000 people, right? And what did we do? We invaded like 6 countries. We invaded 6 countries and went into 20 years of war, right? So this is just a fundamental misunderstanding of Americans. Like the Japanese just don't get it, right? Americans are always kind of at war. We're always kind of at war. We're never not at war. Because even when we're not at war, we're still at war with the Native Americans, right? Like even when we're not at war, right? So we're always kind of at war. So this is just a fundamental difference. They just didn't understand. They just didn't understand. And boy, howdy, does America get into the war, right? Boy, do we do. All right. So we declare war on Japan. We also declare war on Germany. Germany declares war on us, and we're off to the races. All right. So at the same time that Japan is bombing Pearl Harbor, which on this map would be like right about here, at the same time that the the Japanese are bombing Pearl Harbor, the Japanese also invade basically everything down here, right? And they invade Guam, Marshall Islands, Caroline Islands, Palau. These all were American islands that we had taken during the Spanish-American War, and the Japanese just take all these islands. Philippines was the one that was ours. We had been controlling it since the Spanish-American War. They invade the Philippines. They also invade into the East Indies, which declares war on the British as well. They also bombed Australia too, thinking that they would be able to shock Australia, right? They were thinking that they could surprise Australia. What they didn't take into account is that Australians are always kind of just being murdered by their own country anyway, right? With all the like snakes and spiders and things that are like super, super venomous, right? Like every day in Australia, the whole continent's trying to murder you. And so Australians are all kind of a little bit nuts too, and so kind of like Americans, right? We're all kind of a little bit nuts. So what matters here, big number K, is it right? I, big number I. Yep, big number I, the invasion of the Philippines.
It worked out.
All right, so big number I, invasion of the Philippines, which is going to turn into something called the Bataan Death March. All right, so from what we remember, how are the Japanese treating POWs? When they take prisoners, POWs?
Not good.
Bad,
Very
bad,
bad.
bad.
Yeah.
They're raping them, they're torturing them, right? They're treating them very, very badly. When they take over the Philippines, the Philippines falls and they take all the American soldiers custody. They take them prisoner, and the Filipinos prisoner, and then we have some other like allies like Dutch and Australians and stuff who are there with them, right? And they take them all prisoner. Somewhere between 60 and 80,000 soldiers are forced to march across the entire island. Across this island, the island's name is Bataan. We call this march the Death March, and the Death March is really nightmarish. It's where the Americans are tortured and abused, and um, they're tortured and abused the entire time. The Japanese start doing terrible, terrible things to these guys. They start doing terrible things because the worst thing you can do, according to the Japanese, is you can surrender. It's the worst thing you can do. So these guys have proven themselves to be weak and dishonorable and unworthy. And the Japanese ideology is built on racism at the time. And so here we are. This becomes incredibly nasty. There's all sorts of stories from survivors. They made the soldiers march together where they had like a dozen soldiers marching without pants on. And then they tied piano wire to all their testicles so that if one of them trips and falls, it pulls and cuts off the testicles of all the men, right? There's a lot of that kind of stuff going on. Bamboo torture, where you make the person sit down on a bamboo and then you water the bamboo, and then the bamboo will grow about a foot every day if you water it enough, and it grows up into their body. And you just hold them, you tie them down and let the bamboo just grow up into them, stuff like that. There's a lot of that kind of stuff that's going on. Yeah. The result here is Americans are going to fear the Japanese in a way that we don't fear anyone else, right? The Japanese are going to the Americans are going to fear the Japanese, and anti-Japanese racism is going to go skyrocketing in the United States. The result is big number J. Big number J, Japanese internment camps.
Big word
I know.
again.
I know. I knew you were gonna enjoy that, Sam. So big number J, Japanese internment camps. Basically what happens is President Roosevelt issues Executive Order 1066. And Executive Order 1066 orders for the removal of all people of Japanese ancestry from the west coast of the United States. Everyone from Japanese ancestry is arrested, and they're all put into internment camps. These are concentration camps across the western United States, where the Japanese families are forced to live here. Now, these Japanese people who are being rounded up, some of them are Japanese citizens living in the United States, some of them, but most of them, the overwhelming majority of them, are American citizens. These are people born in the United States, in many cases born 2, 3, 4 generations American. 2, 3, 4 generations American, and in there's a lot of cases where they don't even speak Japanese. They don't, they are 2 or 3 or 4 generations American, right? But they're arrested and they're all sent to these different camps. Here's our closest one is Topaz. If you go down there now, there's nothing there now. It's just a cement pad. It's just cement pads, but it was a camp down there. If you want to go see one that's actually built still, Minidoka is still standing. They restored it. And it's like a historical monument today about what it was. And Manzanar down here, those ones still exist. The Japanese are taken out there. What you need to understand here, okay? This is the only time that this is the first time since slavery. This is the first time that American citizens were arrested without any crimes or any charges against them, and they were put into a prison for no reason other than their ethnicity. Yeah. Now, the Japanese families, they end up losing their houses, they end up losing their businesses, they end up losing their cars if they had them, they end up losing all of their property. They're only allowed to take one suitcase full of whatever, suitcase full of clothes with them as they get off to these camps. while they're in the camps, the Japanese are required to like sign allegiance pledges, signing allegiance to the United States and stuff. The groups who refuse to sign to pledge an allegiance to the United States, they're sent to other camps. The worst ones are famously down here in Arkansas, where uh, they're held for longer term, for much longer. Um, one of the Japanese guys, his name is Fred Korematsu. Let me spell his name for you. Korematsu is Korematsu. 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 Fred Korematsu. He was taken from the Los Angeles area, and he was actually brought here to Topaz, Utah, and he was then, at a certain point during the war, he was released from Topaz, and he was allowed to live in Salt Lake City, but he was under like observation and stuff, living in Salt Lake. He was a Japanese guy, Japanese descent, American born of Japanese descent. He was married to a white woman, and he tried to avoid being captured. He actually went to go get plastic surgery to try to have a doctor try to change his face to make him look white. And the doctor was just scamming him basically and just stole all his money, basically. Korematsu was arrested, and Korematsu sues the U.S. government, and it becomes the court case Korematsu versus the United States. Korematsu versus the United States. And he makes an argument that arresting people based only on their ethnicity is a violation of the 14th Amendment that says that he's a citizen and should have rights. The Supreme Court rules against Korematsu. And the Supreme Court rules and says that if the government feels like there's a threat, then the government can do it. Korematsu makes an argument that no Japanese people have been found to be a threat. There was 0 spies found. There was 0 operatives. There was 0 people loyal to Japan. Nobody was found, right? Nobody was ever charged. And he says that they were at war with Germany and nobody's rounding up Germans also, right? And he says that the reason why they're not rounding up Germans is because Germans are white. And so Korematsu's making the argument that it's a racist argument. He loses the court case. Yeah, it goes down in history as probably one of the worst Supreme Court cases. Yeah. It's usually on the list of worst ones, whenever you see lists of worst case rulings. Yeah, pretty sad. All right. Let's go to K, big number K. Well, let's not do this one. All right, we'll come back to the Soviets in a minute. Big number K. Big number K is the United States in Europe. The United States in Europe. So the United States starts with something called Operation Torch. And this is where the United States first invades Africa. We first invade Africa. And this is the German occupied areas of Africa, Northern Africa. And we land in Morocco and fight our way across Africa. We declared war in December of 41, but we don't actually do our first invasion until October of 42. Excuse me, because it takes us so long to train up our army. We don't even have an army at this point, and so we have to train them up, and we have to build weapons and build uniforms and train them and teach them how to be soldiers and build ships to transport them and get them over here, right? Like it takes a while, and even then, by October of 42, we're still not really ready. We aren't really ready for fighting until like June of 43, really. Like it takes us a year and a half to get ready for this war. So we land in Africa and we fight our way across Africa. There's a series of very famous battles here between the German general Rommel, who's probably the most skilled general in the German army, and our general Patton, who is kind of a nut. kind of a crazy man, really skilled general, really good at fighting, but also kind of a nut. Patton believes that he is the reincarnated version of the greatest warriors in history. He believes he's reincarnated Napoleon and reincarnated Caesar. He writes journal entries talking about how he can remember the Napoleonic Wars through the times, you know, and stuff like that. And he like believes it too. He is pretty bonkers. If you read about him, he's very good. Like he knows what he's doing. He's a really good general, you know, but he's also a little bit nuts. He's also a little bit, he actually like he loses rank a couple times, you know, because he's so nuts. Anyway, so we get a bunch of these battles across Africa between these two tank battles. And eventually what we do is we move up into Italy. Okay, so we conquer across Africa and then we invade into Italy. We invade into Italy. I've made jokes about Italy in the past that Italy is, you know, sucks at being in the military, right? Italy's always just kind of happy to be invited, right? Well, here we are. Italy's invited. And so Italy falls pretty quickly. It falls pretty quickly, pretty quickly. And we basically move up Italy. And this is kind of where a lot of the troops are kind of like learning how to fight and stuff and like learning what to do. Because you can train all day long in some camp in Kentucky, and it's not the same as being shot at, right? Like being shot at and learning how to fight is a lot different than training in some place in Missouri or something, right? So this is where, you know, Brazilian troops, Canadian troops, we're all kind of figuring our way out. Italy eventually gets captured. We take over. This is Mussolini, the leader of Italy, and this is Mussolini after the Italians got him. They actually string him up and kill him. This is Mussolini, and this is his wife, and this is his son, and these are some of his, you know, leaders that worked with him and stuff. The Italians string him up. They actually drag Mussolini's body through the streets, through all the different cities of Italy, so that Italians can all take turns spitting and urinating on him and stuff as they're being liberated. While this is happening, the United States is planning for their actual first big thing. Let's make this our next big number. That was what, K? Let's go to L.
Yeah.
L stands for D-Day. D-Day. This is probably America's most glorious, greatest battle, right? Probably. June 6th, 1944, D-Day. It's being led by General Eisenhower, right here. General Eisenhower. The name may be familiar to you. He's going to become president eventually. He'll become president in the 1950s. So General Eisenhower is leading D-Day. What D-Day is the largest amphibious attack in world history. What does it mean when I say amphibious attack? What does that mean? Oh, come on now. What's an amphibian?
It's a cold-blooded animal.
Oh, it's well, it is that, but it's an animal that lives both in the water and on the land, right? Like a frog, right? So an amphibious attack is an attack that goes from the water to the land. Huh? All right. So this is the largest amphibious attack in world history. It's a massive battle. Massive battle. Americans land on these two beaches over here, where the strong German defenses are. The Brits and the Canadians land over here, where the defenses are a little bit lighter, and it's a massive attack. We lose about 12,000 people on this battle, and this is one of our most famous battles. It's I forgot to tell you, it's on the beaches of Normandy, France. It's on the beaches of Normandy, France. It's the coast of France. And the goal for D-Day is to begin liberating France and to open up a second front of the war. The Soviets are fighting on the east, and so now the Americans are going to start fighting on the west. Right? And then they can squash Germany in between, in the middle. So we get these ships pulling up to the beaches of Normandy. Soldiers get out and they go and fight their way up the beaches. They fight their way up the beaches. The result, this is the result after Normandy's done. The result is we're in France now, baby. Okay, American victory. This is an American victory. The Americans land in France, and we've opened up a second front. Within a few months, we're going to have all of France liberated. After that, we move our way up through Belgium, up through Netherlands, and across Germany. Okay. This is a glorious moment in American history, right? I want to emphasize that this is probably America's greatest battle, right? This is the battle that, like, if you want to be really proud about American patriotism, like, this is the battle you think about. This is a big deal. This is a battle that other countries couldn't have done, right? You need to have a massive navy. You need to have a massive army. You need to have massive coordination between planes and between ships. Like, it's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool thing. Pretty cool battle. I mean, it's as cool as killing people can be, right? All right, M, right? That was L, so let's go to M. All right. While Americans are landing on D-Day, the Soviets are fighting back. Where is it? All right, well, the Soviets are fighting back. So M, the Soviets are fighting back. The Soviets have now pushed the Germans out of the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union is going to go into a series of the biggest, bloodiest, nastiest battles the world has ever seen. The Eastern Front of this war is going to kill so many people. So the United States lost 9,000 people in D-Day. Look how many the Soviet Union lost in the Battle of Kursk. 845,000. This particular battle is the largest tank battle the world's ever seen. But every single battle in the Soviet Union is like this. Every single one. The Soviets are literally running red with blood. As the Soviets are moving closer, the Soviets make a direct line right to Berlin, right? They're not messing around. They're not going for other cities. They're not doing anything. They're going straight for Berlin. And as the Soviets do this, they go right across Poland, and the Soviets remember what the Germans did to their prisoners. What were the Germans doing to Soviet prisoners?
Torturing them?
Yeah.
Right.
Starving them, torturing them. And so the Soviets get their revenge. The Soviets start moving into every single town, and they start killing everyone. Everyone. But they're not just killing everyone. They're torturing them, they're raping them, they're beating them. The Soviets are going to produce 40,000 rape babies. That's the babies produced by rape that are born because of this. Okay, Poland is like it's a 3-time loser of this war. Poland picked a fight with nobody. They got invaded by Germany. They got invaded by the Soviet Union, and the Holocaust was primarily happening in Poland. Poland is a 3-time loser in this war. And the Soviets, as they move across, they become the loudest, biggest, baddest, scariest army the world has ever seen. They're a juggernaut of wartime fury. It gets so bad that as the Soviets close in on Berlin, the Americans are just barely entering Germany on the other side, and entire armies of the German army, entire units of the German army just give up, and they turn and they run and they drive across Germany to surrender to the Americans. The Americans are actually slowing down because they're having entire units, entire armies, like brigades of soldiers just surrendering to the Americans, and the soldiers are like, please, please, please let us surrender to you. Don't let us Don't let the Soviets find us. The Soviets start using German bodies to pave the roads of Poland. When it rains and it's muddy, they lay the bodies out into the mud and then spray them down and freeze the ground so that the tanks don't slip in the mud. As the Soviets get close to Berlin, this is the Soviets in Berlin, this is Brandenburg Gate in Berlin. As the Soviets reach Berlin, Hitler starts to panic and he kills himself. He kills himself, and the Soviet Union gets word that Hitler has killed himself. They choose to bomb Berlin for a few more days. They choose to bomb Berlin for 3 or 4 more days before they accept the surrender, just because they can. And Germany's gone. May of 1945, Germany surrenders. May 1945, Germany surrenders. We're going to talk about the Holocaust a little bit later. The Holocaust needs its own time, so we'll talk about the Holocaust later. But we're going to leave this here. I'm going to talk about strategic bombing also, but we'll leave it here for now. Okay. All right. Are we good? You guys have questions with this super uplifting lesson?